Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Index Engine's webinar, How to Help Your Clients Become Governance Ready and Save Money. I'm your host, Ralph Goodwin. I'm Index Engine's North American Channel Manager, and I'm joined today by our featured speaker, Jim McGann, Index Engine's Vice President of Marketing. During our webinar, our audience members will be on mute. However, we do encourage you to please type your comments and questions in the chat area, or you can email Jim at the email listed right there. We will answer your questions as time permits at the end of the webinar, and we'll also follow up with you later on. In terms of the agenda, we'll start by reviewing some of the challenges that businesses are dealing with around data today, and we'll also talk about Gartner's views on them. We'll then discuss the three main use cases that Index Engine solves and provide you a deeper glance into each of them, with a special focus on how we can help customers solve their data governance challenges, even if they don't have a specific budget set aside for them. Finally, we'll discuss Index Engine's partner program and how we create a new revenue stream for our VARs that will complement and differentiate your existing offers around storage and data protection. Index Engines is a New Jersey-based company who's the leader in enterprise information management and archiving solutions. Our platform allows customers to understand really what's in their data and then act upon it intelligently. Our scalable indexing solution was purposely built for petabyte-sized environments for both unstructured data and email, and it's the only solution on the market today that can support both primary and backup environments. Once a customer understands what's in their environment, they can utilize Index Engines to continue to govern their data on their own policies or those that might be dictated to them by outside governances such as HIPAA or the GDPR. Some of the significant relationships that we enjoy today are with Dell EMC, with whom we're a select partner. AWS uses us to migrate data from backup tape to the cloud, and advisories such as Ernst & Young utilize us to help their customers intelligently manage their data across their enterprises. And from a customer standpoint, we have really a wide range of customers from very small businesses to major companies such as JPMC or Citibank. From a partner perspective, the reason that our VARs have signed with us is that, as I mentioned earlier, we create a new revenue stream for them, but we also significantly differentiate their current offerings around storage or backup really from their competitors. With Index Engines, you'll be able to help your customers intelligently migrate to new storage or backup platforms by doing data cleanups or classifications. And when a customer has moved to a new backup solution, we can manage that legacy backup left behind without the customers having to keep that old legacy backup environment around. We can also assist your customers comply with regulations such as the HIPAA or the GDPR or even the new California data privacy law through our very scalable software and our intelligent workflows. And to give you a deeper look into those offerings, I'd like to introduce Index Engine's VP of Marketing, Jim McGann. Jim?
Hey, thanks, Ralph. I appreciate the introduction. Index Engines, we've been in business for over a decade, helping customers manage their information and their data. It's never been more important than it is today because you have significant governance and regulatory requirements that our customers are facing, specifically around unstructured data and email. So what we're seeing in a typical customer is that technology, Index Engine's technology is really a key requirement, really to bridge the IT and legal divide. And if you're like us, when we go out to customer meetings, we deal a lot with the IT organization. They don't have a great relationship with the legal team. Or if you deal with the legal team, they don't really have a great relationship with the IT side of the business. The companies that are really implementing innovative governance strategies, that divide has been really bridged, and the IT and legal departments really work together. So on the left here, you see companies have pretty solid governance strategies. They've been spending decades building these policies, these governance risk compliance strategies, GRC strategies, Typically, they'll work with consulting partners like Deloitte, KPMG, Ernst Young, and those types of folks to help really build these governance strategies. That's been happening in a vacuum, and it's really kind of been driven, on paper and in concepts and so on. On the right, you've got the IT infrastructure. That's where most of us have played: software companies, hardware companies, value-added resellers, and so on. So really what needs to happen is the gap needs to be bridged, and Index Engine's technology is really communicating governance strategy on top of existing technology and new technology to really help customers implement sound regulatory support policies and so on. So the challenges that we're seeing at customers is that these regulations and risks, and Ralph had mentioned a few early on, especially the EU GDPR, things like HIPAA compliance. California just passed a privacy law. We'll see other states passing privacy laws as well. Canada has some specific privacy laws. But we're seeing these regulations and the risk of not managing this data becoming an issue. Sensitive data that's on the network not being managed could breach the firewall and cause national press and fines. So organizations must be governance ready. And when we speak to customers, especially those responsible for infrastructure, responsible for data strategies, the governance ready message definitely resonates. So how are you, Mr. Customer, becoming governance ready to support your legal and compliance? So the key challenges and questions to ask your customer is, do you know what exists? Are you able to classify your data? Do you know what exists and why it exists? Are you able to protect and secure sensitive data? That assumes you can find it. Can you support your privacy regulations? The EU GDPR, we're seeing significant activity in that area, not only in our EMEA-based customers, but also in US and Canada-based customers that do business in the EU. So if they have personal data for any EU citizen, they need to treat it with the requirements of that regulation. Are you able to respond to legal and compliance requests? I mean, e-discovery's been there for years. How are you doing with that? How are you supporting compliance requests? We have customers that have FOIA requirements. We have customers that have HIPAA requirements. How are you satisfying those? What are your retention policies? Are you saving everything forever? I mean, it's a great strategy for any of our partners that sell storage to say, save everything, multiple copies of everything forever, because it's going to require significant storage, petabytes of storage. But those days are gone. I think customers need to really have better strategies and really just save what they need to save. Even our key partner, Dell EMC, is really talking to customers about minimizing data minimization and reducing storage footprint, moving data to cloud tiers and so on to support policies versus saving everything forever. So those are the business challenges. I was happy to see this recent paper that came out from Gartner. The title of the paper is "Why Store Everything is Not an Effective Information Governance Strategy." It came out a few weeks ago, actually. Very good paper, but there's some highlights in there that I think we can point out. Gartner typically writes these papers and then puts a number of different recommendations. But what they're saying in this paper is that, information governance programs have failed. And a lot of your customers have implemented these over the past number of years and have not had great success. So I think as a trusted provider for your customers coming in and helping make these programs successful, you'll get great accolades in your install base. But they have failed. They failed because customers really don't assess the size and risk of their enterprise data footprint. They really don't know what exists. And they try to implement these policies without having any idea what this data looks like. So what view into it. So they're basically kind of shooting in the dark. The other point that they bring up is that organizations are not managing or disposing of data. Again, the save everything strategy, not getting rid of data that doesn't have any value, not really implementing a solid retention policy. So the save everything and multiple copies of everything strategy is basically the status quo. Again, lack of communication between the legal and compliance and technology teams leads to overcollection. We talk about that lack of communication and how without any Any definition or education on what the policy should be, the IT organization is just really going to over-collect and over-preserve data. And then poor data management, specifically around what they mentioned, legacy systems, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, because Index Engines has some unique capability around legacy backup data and managing that. So this is a good paper. I'm sure Ralph can point you in the right direction of this paper. But this really provides significant roadmap for your customers on how they should be managing their unstructured data environment. Again, their recommendations are, definitely get a better understanding of your data. What's sensitive, what's outdated. They're using a new term called sort. You may be familiar with an old term called rot, which is redundant, outdated, trivial data. They flipped it around and added sensitive to that. But understand your rot data or your sort data and where it is, what it is, why it needs to exist. Create a content map of what exists. Make decisions about that map, data based on the map. Define your retention policies, and then really execute on that, including your legacy data. So, I mean, there's a lot in the paper. I was just trying to pull some of the highlights. I thought it was pretty interesting. It's very much aligned to what we at Index Engines are doing. If your customers are Gartner clients, I would encourage them to read that paper. If it resonates with them, we have a very high quality solution that Gartner recommends on a frequent basis. And we have analyst friends at Gartner that would be happy to give recommendations based on Index Engines to your customers as well. So let's first talk about the primary storage management. That's one of our more popular areas for our technology. So your customers, as I mentioned in the introduction, are really saving and hoarding significant volumes of data on primary storage. Really, why manage data? Why would they change from the status quo? A lot of customers see a lot of pain around continual storage capacity upgrades. So in the past, adding capacity, adding storage was just an easy task. It was, easy as calling up your local vendor or your local partner. Now, data, in managed data centers and more complex or secure data centers, it becomes more complex to stand up new storage. Customers going through consolidation, migration, cloud tiering, moving data around. Anytime you deal with data movement, you deal with significant expense. So, managing it becomes more expensive than it really needs to be. But really the driver that we see is data governance. Why manage data? Because your governance dictates that you need to do that. The challenges around these regulatory policies as well as retention policies are an area that we can partner with you to help your clients solve. And also an ancillary benefit to that is tapping into their intellectual property. We have customers that deploy Index Engines to go through a data cleanup exercise, and they find old engineering documents, old research, old intellectual property that has significant value for the corporation. So finding that and harnessing that is a huge benefit and a huge advantage and competitive advantage for many customers. So Index Engines, in terms of our technology, there's a number of indexing, search, reporting tools that exist on the market today. We really stand apart from them, and we've done a number of benchmarks and a number of performance studies on our solution versus the nearest competitor. And our solution has been architected to be significantly faster. And if anybody's interested in going into a more of a deep technology dive, we can do that at a later date. But if you lift the covers under our product and you look inside, there's an architecture that's typically 5 to significantly faster speed, 5 times faster indexing speeds and performance than the nearest competitor on the market today. And I'll talk about some case studies around that in a little bit. There's 3 real use cases that we see for our primary data management product. The first is around data minimization. So what we typically see when we talk to customers is that there's a lot of age data, rot data, obsolete data that's on your network. Most customers guess, that it may be, 5 to 10% of what exists out there. It typically runs around 40%. And, you can pretty much bet any client that you have when they say, no, it can't be 40%, that it ends up being 40+% of what's out there. And that allows customers to reduce their storage footprint, maybe retire out aged or legacy storage applications or storage environments that they would like to clean up and really recoup their storage budget. The second area is intelligent migration. Looking and cleaning up data, finding data based on value, and migrating it to a cloud, for example. So some customers are looking at data that hasn't been accessed in more than 3 years, and they may realize that it does have value, and they migrate it out to a cloud tier. We just have one of our newest customers is an engineering firm, is a construction firm actually out of the UK. And they're finishing up a number of key projects, major projects, and what they're doing is finding all the data associated with that project and moving it out to the cloud for long-term retention. So intelligent migration, very different from those kind of lift and load strategies where you're moving everything. It's more focused on let's look at the data, profile it, and classify it, and move it to different tiers of storage based on its value. And then finally, governance, finding and securing sensitive data in support of regulation. That's an area that we're seeing increase significantly. So those are the three use cases. If you heard your customer talk about any of those and the customer struggles with implementing those technology because the scale of the data, the complexity of the data is too much for them, that's the area that we really excel. I'm not going to go into the detail on this. We have a number of more detailed presentations on what we call our workflow. We don't really like to present features and functions of technology because customers are over-presented to these days. What we really present is a workflow and a strategy on allowing customers to know what they have, manage it accordingly, and apply governance policies to it. So when we go through this detailed presentation around this workflow wheel, there's really three different sections. There's the classification section of the data. And this section here in the bright green is the know what you have section. So every customer that we have a conversation with, they start out by, we don't even have any idea what exists out there. We don't know how many files. We don't know what kind of files. We don't know who owns them. We don't know when they were last accessed. So the first step of that is indexing the data, adding a layer of intelligence to the data center. And then within the index engine's solution or software, there's a number of reporting capabilities that allow you to classify the data based on value. So phase one is really that classification step, which is typically a process that customers go through first, obviously, to really understand what exists. The next step is the management. So there's built-in disposition in the index engine interface, so we can support data minimization. So in the classification phase here, if you find a whole class of data that is outdated, obsolete, trivial, you could just execute by selecting a button in the index interface and say, just delete that data. That data will be deleted and gone. There's also the other management capability, which is migration. We have archiving built in. We have copying of the data built in, a number of different management tools built in. And then finally, the last phase, the gray phase, is governance. A lot of search capability to search and find sensitive data, personal data. The search is very, very comprehensive, from keyword Boolean search down to conceptual search, down to regular expression and pattern search as well. Allows you to find all the personal data that exists in your files and email. And then finally, ongoing monitoring. There's a number of monitoring tools. So stored queries, queries that are run on a scheduled basis, automated reporting. So as you build these policies, the data can be monitored and managed on a continual basis. That's the high-level workflow. We have a detailed presentation that goes through lots more detail on this. I want to highlight a little bit about the data minimization. I think if your customers are really struggling with some of their IT budgets, they're not as big as they used to be, or they're really allocated for other purposes, and you're kind of really in there focusing on trying to help them, show significant ROI on the data. We can help you with building these ROI analysis. This analysis of a customer that has a half a petabyte or 500 terabytes of data on a shared file server. We use the statistics from Gartner, and it's based out of this report from 2017, key metric report. that says the average or the fully loaded cost of a petabyte of data is about $1.6 million a year. So that's heating, cooling, data center costs, resources, the cost of backing it up and protecting it. So all the detailed costs, they're detailed out in that paper if anybody wants to go into that any further. So the fact that, for half a petabyte in this case, we're looking at $800,000 a year, fully loaded cost as their business as usual. If you go through these 4 classifications, looking at the active data, that's the stuff that people are accessing. So look at last access date or create date on that. That typically is a small percentage. This one, in this example, it's about 22%. That data is going to remain in place and continue to be monitored. The inactive data, stuff that people aren't actually touching, in this example, it's about 30%. And we want to move that out to low-cost cloud storage. So you can see that data here in orange. You can see the cost of that 150 terabytes and how by moving it to cloud storage, the cost of keeping it in the cloud, the footprint or the cost reduces significantly. Sensitive data, finding old PSTs, old contracts from legal, old finance documents from members of the finance team. We can do a search based on Active Directory membership to say, show me documents owned by the finance team that are Excel spreadsheets that contain this keyword in the title, analysis, for example. You can find that data, move that maybe to the cloud for legal review, get that off-prem. And then finally, rot data upwards of 40%, as I mentioned earlier. Let's move that to cold storage or just delete it altogether. As you can see here, the numbers really don't make that much of a difference. But you can see the transform cost, business as usual, $800,000 a year. Transform cost about $222,000. A 3-year savings about $1.7 million. Transform cost about $222,000, savings $577,000. So about 1.7, almost $2 million savings over 3 years. So if your customers are willing to look at these numbers, we can go through these worksheets with them, do this kind of analysis, and help them clean up the data. I do have an example. This is an electronics manufacturer on the West Coast, a very large company. They were in the process of becoming governance ready. They have about 50 petabytes of unstructured data across many, many different storage environments. They started with a pilot project, about 2.5 petabytes of data, unstructured data. This was done with one of our global advisory firm partners. There's not to say that it couldn't be done with our reseller, our value-added reseller partners. I think this is a good opportunity to do these kind of governance readiness assessments. The goal here for them was to become governance ready, understand what exists, tier data to the cloud, clean it up, and so on. So again, this was about 11.5 billion files on a number of NetApp filers. When EY or Ernst Young was the advisory partner, when they first started working on this project, they asked the client, how many files do you think you have? And they said about 300 to 400 million files. It was about 11 billion files. So were they shocked? A little bit, but not unusual that customers have no idea what exists there. So they had tried to do this project with IBM and using some IBM software. It took them 6 months before they gave up. So 6 months to even get the data indexed, and it wasn't even finished. Index engines came in with 6 virtual servers, 5 weeks of metadata indexing. It ran at 100 terabytes of indexing per day. That was a throttled speed. It could actually go faster, but these were production servers. And their initial results, that they found 600 terabytes of log files that were from an application running that was supposed to delete these logs that didn't. They were being protected and backed up and secured. Could be immediately purged in this case. Another 400 terabytes of age data that was purged, so they immediately recouped over almost half the data, a petabyte of storage, deleted it. CIO said it was the most successful innovation in his tenure, and they're now in the process of doing this on the 50 petabytes and cleaning that up. I know at this point, they've cleaned up over 2 petabytes of data in their data center. So that's an actual example of a customer doing classification and a partner, hand-holding them through this assessment process. So that's on primary storage. On backup storage, and I know we're giving a very light introduction here, backup storage is a unique capability for index engines. So we see our customers that have accumulated lots of backup data from a number of different reasons. One, because of mergers or acquisitions, change of vendor strategies. So they were using, for example, IBM's TSM, for a number of years, and now they switched over to Net Backup or the networker. Or they've acquired a company that uses Commvault and their standard backup environment is Avamar, for example. So why transform? Why clean that stuff up? You know, the reason when they go through these mergers, they maintain these legacy backup museums. So the backup museums are these old infrastructures of tape libraries and media servers and backup software to maintain access to this data. And there's risk associated with using tapes for long-term retention. Anything that they store on tape in offsite storage like Iron Mountain, that's archival class data, and they're keeping it in a salt mine somewhere without knowing what exists. If they've got privacy requirements, which large companies that do business in the EU do have that requirement, then they need to manage that personal data on those legacy tapes. Otherwise, they could face fines. Again, another workflow wheel, a little bit similar, but tape adds a different spin to the game. There's really the first step is catalog management. So if the customer has an old net backup or TSM environment and they're paying significant maintenance costs on that, index engines can ingest the catalog and take ownership of the backup catalog and manage it going forward, provide the same level of search and reporting, but for significantly cheaper. We find it to be about 10 to 20% of the maintenance costs of those brand name vendors like Veritas and IBM. Once the catalog is ingested, full reporting on the catalog metadata. So that is a product that we offer for catalog management. We provide restores as well, so the customer can use the catalog to search and find specific backup data sets, and index engines can scan the tape, index what exists on the tape. Indexing it allows the content to be searched at a more granular level and allows full access or restoration of individual files or emails from tape. Or they could look at a full-on migration. So we have customers, a lot in financial services, a lot in highly regulated organizations, to be able to create a migration strategy and classify what exists on tape. Say, for example, I only need data for the past 3, 5, or 7 years, only need these specific types of data, and I need a single instance of that content. Migrate that data out off of tape. Typically, customers put it in the cloud and then manage it in the cloud for long-term retention versus managing it on offline tape. So that's a workflow that we support, customers have implemented, and allow you to clean up legacy tape environments. Again, why would you retire legacy backup applications and then implement a new vendor like Index Engines? Cost savings. I'll have some examples of the costs in a little bit, but really there's 3 specific products that we offer here. And the idea that most people have a difficult time understanding is that Index Engines delivers a fundamentally different approach. There's no need for the original backup software. So if you have a customer that has a legacy tape environment, they could hand Index Engines, 20 old net backup tapes, and without the net backup software, Index Engines could scan them, index them, and search and extract individual files or emails from those tapes. So the first product we have is the backup catalog management, as I mentioned, allow you to retire legacy backup software applications, and most importantly, the expensive maintenance. Second product is selective restores, so you can still keep the data on tape and individually restore files or emails to support legal or compliance requests. And the third is backup data to cloud migration, saying, you know what, I want to leave tape altogether, eliminate tape for long-term retention, and migrate the data of value from tape to the cloud. And, moving data from tape sounds crazy, but what Index Engines does is find the data of value, which is typically far less than 5% of what's on tape, and selectively extract that 5% and only move that, rehydrate that off of tape. So it's not as crazy as you think, being that we're doing it in an efficient manner and only selectively pulling what's required from tape. Here's some examples of the catalog retirement. So these are actual customers that are of Index Engines that have been paying software maintenance for legacy applications. You can see it was fairly significant. Most of them in the millions of dollars, and the last example is $500,000, so a smaller customer. So these are all legacy backup applications that they're running to maintain access to a legacy tape environment. Most of these customers have switched over to a Dell EMC backup environment, one of our key partners. And you can see the price here is typically about 10 to 20% of what they were paying for the software maintenance. So why would they do it? To save money. and to retire legacy applications. So with that, I'm going to pretty much wrap up. I gave you a very, very quick, very high-level view of some of the use cases for index engines. We have a lot more detailed presentations, but if anything there sparked an interest, you should engage with us, specifically with Ralph, and we can talk to you further about what we have to offer. But I'd like to pass it back to Ralph, and maybe he can talk about some of the unique partner capabilities that we put in place to help make you successful.
Great, thanks, Jim. Yeah, as far as the partner program, we offer a pretty comprehensive program that really enables our VARs and their customers to quickly benefit from our solution without a significant time and personnel investment up front. We'll come in, we'll help you train your sales and engineering staff on the product to the point where they can recognize an opportunity. And then we'll come in and kind of do the heavy lifting for you to help you through the sales process and close the business as you kind of get to know us. We offer things like registered opportunity pricing, joint business plans, NFR software, and really world-class marketing support that includes co-branded white papers, data sheets, joint webinars, and more like that. You go to the next slide, Jim. Thanks. So, to sum it up, why do people partner with us? Why do VARs partner with us? And it's really, I guess, kind of help you take that further step from being another box or a storage provider or software provider to really be more of a trusted advisor, to help your customers manage their data as they migrate to new storage and new backup platforms, or as they deal with governance, such as we were discussing HIPAA or the GDPR or what have you. It's really more of a trusted advisor thing that we bring to our partners. With that, we'll take a few minutes to answer any questions. In the meantime, if you'd like to learn more, my contact information is right there. Please do reach out to me directly. We'd love to talk with you. We are recording the webinar, so we will share this link with you in a follow-up email. But beyond that, I thank you for attending, and I wish you a great day.
Ralph, I mean, told me we were trying to keep this to 30 minutes, and we've gone over, so we won't really have time for questions. But if anybody does have any questions, Ralph's email address is on there. Shoot it out to Ralph. If you forget Ralph's email address, you can just send it to info@indexengines.com, and we will get back to you very quickly. So thank you all. Thank you, Ralph, for today, and we look forward with working with you in the future. Have a good day.
Thank you.